Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Salman Ghaffar and I'm one of the instructors and directors at Hussain. I've been teaching for the IBA test prep for almost 25 years now, Alhamdulillah. I'm a graduate of IBA myself. I graduated from IBA in the year 99. And I've been preparing students for IBA's admission tests since the year 95. Now, the objective of today's video is to give you a small introduction of what are the important things to keep in mind while going for the IBA interview. Many of you have cleared the IBA test and many of you have cleared it without the requirement for the interview, so congratulations for that. There are obviously going to be many people who have still cleared the test but have been asked to appear for an interview, and this video is addressed to those people and in future to people who will appear for other interviews, be it CBM, Zabist and so on and so forth. What are the important things to keep in mind? We're going to try and keep this short, so you can watch this quickly and understand the important things to keep in mind when you go for your interview. The first thing that you need to remember is that IBA, you've submitted an admission form at IBA, and IBA has information about you, such as your name, your preferred program, your father's name, your father's profession, and the schools and colleges that you've been to so far, and the grades that you've scored in those schools and colleges. So that is the information that IBA already has about you, and it's going to start off the interview based on that information. They may also ask you to introduce yourself at the very outset, so you need to remember what you've written in your admission form. So if you don't remember that, just go over the email that you've received from IBA regarding the information that you've submitted and keep that information handy. But before you actually go for the interview, what are the things to keep in mind? Please make sure that you dress nicely. Guys, please make sure that you're neatly dressed. That you're wearing a nice formal shirt and a nice formal trousers, clean polished shoes and a nice tie. You can also wear a suit if you like, though that's not important at the undergraduate level so much, but a tie is really important. Girls, you know how to dress well mostly, so just do your thing. Now, as far as when you walk into the interview, please make sure that you look cheerful, you smile, you say Assalamu alaikum or good morning or good afternoon, and you do not sit down at the seat until you are asked to do so. And when the interviewers ask you to sit down, that's the point at which you sit down. Okay, you will probably have 3 people taking your interview. Those are usually faculty members, counselors, and also alumni members are at times asked to appear to take interviews of potential students. So those are the kinds of people that you will be talking to. So please keep in mind that these are people who are very good at their profession, be it teaching or whatever it is that they do, and you need to give them the proper amount of respect. There should be, at no point should it seem to them that you are being egotistical or that you are being inflexible or that you are trying to pretend to know more than you do. You have to keep yourself humble and not at all arrogant. Okay? You need to sit straight, make sure that you sit upright, and you need to maintain eye contact with the person that you're talking to. Remember, eye contact is the most important thing with interviews, because based on the movement of your eyes, a lot of things can be determined, whether you're lying, whether you are unsure of your answer, and so on and so forth. So make sure that you maintain eye contact. It's an important thing to do. It's something that you must practice as well. Okay, and overall, do not get aggressive at any point. There will be points at which the interviewers will try to instigate you, maybe ask you questions that you're not so comfortable answering. Then at no point should you get arrogant or instigated or angry at, because if that happens, then basically that will be the end of your interview and your chance of getting into IBA. So those are the kinds of things that you need to keep in mind. Okay, so dress nicely, greet them nicely, smile, be calm, be confident, but make sure that you also are not arrogant at all. Now, what are the things that IBA will look at when they try to determine whether you are going to be the right candidate for them? Well, the first thing that you need to that they look at is whether you know what program you're applying for and why you're applying for that particular program. Okay, for example, let's say you're applying for a BBA program, but you have no idea what a business degree looks like. That will be a problem, right? So make sure that you read up on the program that you're applying, so that you know exactly why you're applying for that particular program. So the first thing to remember is the motivation to do that particular degree. The second thing that you need to be good at is the knowledge of the subjects that you studied so far. It is obviously important that if you studied, for example, physics or chemistry or accounting or business studies or computer science, you will be asked questions from your subjects as well. So you can expect questions, for example, let's say you've done accounting, somebody could ask you, okay, how do you make a bank reconciliation statement? If you've done math, then somebody could ask you, okay, how do you find the turning point of a curve? Or how do you find the area under a curve, and so on and so forth. You might even be given a math question to solve, and it just depends upon the kinds of grades that you have as well, the kinds of percentages that you possess. So, and a very common question that you get at IBA is, what is your favorite subject? And if you're going to say that your favorite subject is, for example, English literature or history, then you need to make sure that you're good at those subjects, so that when they ask you questions based on those subjects, you're able to answer those questions. So your favorite subject should be a subject that you are good at, not just something that you like but you're terrible at. Okay. The third thing that they obviously look at is your confidence level. Now, confidence level doesn't mean that you become arrogant. There's a very fine line between being confident and being arrogant. So your confidence should be right up there. The way you smile, the way you talk, the way you respond to questions. Even if you don't know the answer to a question and you confidently say that I'm sorry, but I do not recall, that's a mark of confidence. You don't have to answer each and every question. You may not remember something. You may not be sure about it. You can also say that I am not certain of the answer, but as far as my memory goes, this is what it was. And as long as you can answer things confidently, they'll be okay with that. So, but make sure that you don't go beyond confidence, which is being arrogant or being defiant. Don't do that. Your communication skills, your ability to speak well. So if they're asking you a question in English, you should be able to answer well in English. If they're asking you a question in Urdu, you should be able to answer the question in Urdu. Answer the question in the language that it is asked. This is one of the most important things that you need to remember. If your English is weak or if your Urdu is weak, then I would strongly suggest that you practice it for the next 2-3 days and try to build your confidence in that particular language. But you must speak positively and speak well in that particular language. It's very important that you do that. Then they will also ask you questions based on your extracurricular activities. Have you done any social service, for example, or have you taken part in any sports? Is that something that you're really good at? Now, for example, you might be a great soccer player, or you might be brilliant at cricket. Whatever it is that you're good at and that you've done consistently, you should talk about it. What if you don't have a lot of extracurriculars? Well, you don't need to lie about it. If you don't have a lot of extracurriculars, whatever it is that you have done, you could talk about it. And if you haven't had the time, but you've got excellent grades as well, then you could just say that, I'm sorry, but for the last 2-3 years, I've just been too caught up in my own education, so I haven't had too much time to take part in extracurriculars. But you could talk about whether you read, or whether you play chess, or whether you like computer games. Whatever it is that you like doing, you should talk about it. But talk about it in a way that shows how it adds value to your personality. Whatever you do in life, it should add to your personality. It should add to your career growth, your personal growth. You could be great at playing computer games, and as long as that helps you achieve a certain objective in your own personality, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be something that is totally out of this world. You don't need to have taken part in a science experiment at NASA. That's not the only thing that would matter. So these are the important things that you need to know, right? So your subject knowledge, your confidence, your motivation to do that particular subject, to that particular degree, your communication skills, your extracurriculars, those are very, very important. Okay. Now, before I end this short conversation, I would want to give you some examples of questions that have been asked earlier. For example, a very common question that you get asked is, okay, what if you don't offer you an admission in IBA? What is your backup plan? Now, that's an interesting question. So you could talk about your backup plan being another university, such as CBM or Zabist or LUMS or whatever it is that your backup plan really is. Or you could talk also about the fact that this is the round 1 application, so you also have the round 2 application, and if God forbid you're unable to get in through in round 1, you will apply again in round 2 and try to make sure that you get in through that. If it is already round 2 by now, then you will have to talk about your fallback options, but obviously be confident and say that, I really hope that I've done enough to convince you that I am going to be a worthwhile addition to IBA. Another important question that they ask you very commonly is, why should we choose you over somebody else? Well, you don't need to criticize anybody else. What you need to talk about is your own potential, is your own ability. And that comes from whatever your personality has combined into over the last 18 years or so of your life. So talk about what you've achieved so far. Talk about your extracurriculars, talk about your education, talk about your motivation to do that degree, and talk about how important it is and how useful it is in your plans to be at IBA, and how you can be a positive contributor to IBA. For example, if you're a great debater, you can talk about how you will work at the debating society at IBA, and you will represent IBA at different levels internationally and locally, and how that could be useful for IBA student body. So whatever it is that you're great at, talk about that. Use that opportunity. Okay, and furthermore, they might ask you questions about whether you're updated onto current affairs. Now, I would strongly urge you that you watch the news over the last 3-4 days that have happened. The important things, for example, recently the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia visited Pakistan, this being February 2019. So you could talk about that visit and the importance of that visit to Pakistan's economy, and what kind of agreements have been signed. So, just read through the newspapers for the last 2-3 days, watch the current affair programs, the important ones, the useful ones, and you'll get a very good idea of what has been happening over the last week or so in Pakistan's economy, in Pakistan's political sphere, in Pakistan's economic sphere, and then talk about those events as well. So it's important that because IBA wants to have a student body that is aware of its own surroundings, and not just somebody who's focused on their basic academic knowledge in terms of studying from books, but also from what's happening around in the world. And they'd like to encourage people like those to come to IBA. So if you can show that, and if you can show that you're aware of what's happening in the world around you, that is also very, very useful. Okay, you will also get questions about your family background. What does your father do, what does your mother do, and how you can use that for your own benefit. That is something that is also worthwhile talking about, and talk about how positive influences have shaped your career so far and shaped your personality so far, especially if there are any good qualities that have come through from your parents. Talk about those as well, because those are going to be very, very important. That will show the interviewer that you respect your family and you respect your parents as well, and that's something that is very important at IBA. Okay, so talking about the positive influences in your life is useful. Let's say there's been a cousin or a family friend who has motivated you to do important things in life, successful things in life, then those are the things that you need to talk about in terms of your positive influences, how that has driven you to achieve more, and how you will use that influence to motivate other people in your life to also achieve more. Okay, so those are the kinds of things. And one other question that you normally get a lot is also strengths and weaknesses. Please tell us 3 of your strengths and 3 of your weaknesses. So you should talk about the things that are your strong points. Definitely try to think of 3 or 4 things that you believe are your strengths. For example, you could talk about how positive a person you have, how positive an approach to life towards life you have, how hardworking you are, how persevering you are, or if there's something interesting, something that is not run-of-the-mill, something that is different. For example, your ability in chess, your ability in playing badminton. You could talk about those things as your strengths and how that motivates you to do even better. And if there are certain weaknesses, because they will ask you about your weaknesses as well, so you could talk about your weaknesses, but then try to talk about weaknesses that are things that you know that you are weak at, but you're working on to improve upon. So for example, you could talk about, and this is just an example, this is not necessary that you use something like this, but you could talk about the fact that your communication skills are slightly weak, and that you're working on those weaknesses to improve your skills, because you know that at IBA you will need to have very good communication skills to make your presentations and to attend seminars and so on and so forth. So you could talk about weaknesses that then you're working on to improve upon. So all in all, it's a very interesting experience when you go to IBA to appear in your interview. Don't be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of. People are not going to rip you apart. You will just go there, you will give it your best, and if you don't do as well as you think you can, then there will always be another time. But in the meantime, for the next 2-3 days that you have before the actual interview takes place, I strongly urge you to focus on the things that I've spoken about. Read the newspapers, work on your communication skills, work on your confidence, and choose your clothes wisely, and work on your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and talk about, if let's say your grades are slightly weak, maybe you didn't do so well in your O levels or your metric or your first year, then you should have a good reason for why that happened and how you're going to improve upon that in your second year, and how will you make sure that you get an extraordinary result to meet the IBA requirements. So all in all, I wish you all the best of luck, and if you have any further questions, you can post them down here and we'll try to answer them as quickly as possible.